Eddie Hearn was doing an interview, and it had to do with Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. And there's a number of things that Eddie does well from a speaking standpoint. Like talking about him being a great promoter and whatnot, is largely paperwork done behind the scenes. To be able to come out and to be a spokesperson and a recognizable face, there is a massive art to it. And one thing that Eddie, and he's a handsome guy and he's well-spoken, but one thing, no matter how nice he might look while saying it, he is not afraid to be critical. And that was the situation here. He's talking about Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. And one of the reasons I found this compelling is when he's talking about Mike Tyson's return, what you can expect from Mike Tyson, who's been out, who's been laid off, when he's returning. Though a larger gap and though the ages are different, though the rule set is different, it is not wholly a different comparison than Conor McGregor returning against Michael Chandler. I mean, Eddie Hearn said something that it was so simple. Like, he said Mike Tyson was at the end of his game when he left the sport X number of years ago. He was at the end of his game. He was not the celebrated and recognized Mike. The highlights that you will see playing in all the reels did not come from that time frame. And he says, and this was where it got very simple, he says, do you think he improved? He put it as a question. And if you're a naysayer to the fight, that one simple question becomes pretty powerful, doesn't it? So I'm starting to think about that, and there is a way to go, by the way. Like, there is an answer, the rules and the time frame, and we don't wholly have to guess about Mike and what it used to be. He fought Roy Jones 3 years ago. I mean, there is some ideas of where we might be. And I tell you that because that's largely the same excuses or thoughts that you might have with Conor. It's a very difficult thing that Conor's getting ready to do. And as praised as Conor is, I do feel like there's some stuff that gets missed and he doesn't get the credit. Like think about coming back when you don't have to. Think about getting there and doing this when there doesn't appear to be an upside that if you were in those shoes, you could relate to. Like there doesn't appear to be a financial gain if you were in Conor's shoes that would incentivize you enough to do it. I'm guessing, right? More of a question for him. It's at a weight class, 170 pounds. I would love for you to tell me another athlete, and if you have them, great, tell me two. And if you have them, great, tell me three. But I don't think you can. In the UFC, who have covered the spread in main event status at 3 different weight classes. I mean, before you think 170 pounds isn't a big deal, before you're not totally impressed and he's already done it a couple of times and he took some time off into the movie, like, there is definitely a credit that has to be given there. Dan Henderson was one of the most well-known for covering the spread. And within the UFC, he did not do 3 different weight classes in main event spots. Let's think here. Kenny Florian was like the original pound for pound. Fought for a world championship at 145. Was in the finals of the toughest tournament in sport, the Ultimate Fighter, at 185. So 85 to 70 to 50. Okay, Kenny, 4 times. But did he do it in main events, right? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's very rare, and it's a very incredible thing. It's a very hard thing to do. And that's before we get into, right, if you're able to find a motivation, you're able to find a dedication, and this is what you want to do, and that spotlight and the allure, and this is who you are, and all that kind of stuff. you still have to deal with the fact that you're coming off of an injury. One of the worst injuries that we've seen in the sport. As a matter of fact, just to qualify that, I don't know that you could cite a worse injury for me. I do believe that you could cite the same injury that was done to somebody else. But I think the worst thing we've seen is that, right? Right, when it happened to Weidman, when it happened to Corey Hill, when it happened to Anderson. Tough stuff. So that's with a much more limited layoff. But if Eddie Hearn wants to give the Tyson and Paul fight a hard time by just asking you a question, do you believe in the time that Mike has been gone that he has improved? It dampers things to an extent. And I am very curious how this is going to be played from a PR standpoint with the alleged medical emergency that Tyson had with the airplane. Like, if you were to call any PR firm in the world, you get a hold of any rep. Wouldn't matter if it's their first day on the job or they got 30 years in the business and they are the crisis management experts. They are all going to instantly have the same idea, which is to smooth this and move on as quickly as possible. To put out some kind of a statement that greatly lessens this and to move on. And perhaps they all come to that because it's the right thing. Perhaps, right? It's all an experiment. But there is the other side to it. Right, there is the other side. Before Jake Paul goes, hey, I sure wish Mike well. And I've seen this in campaigns so many times where they're campaigning, they're doing all these terrible things to each other. And one guy gets an ailment and they're like, hey, I wish you well, and get back on the campaign trail. That's the way that it is generally handled. I'm just sharing for you. There is another way. Which if you could, I just know how I would handle it, and it wouldn't be, I sure wish you well. I sure wish you well so that I can engage in a sport with you where the number one requirement by law is that I damage you. I just wouldn't have done it. I just said, man, if you can't handle that airplane flight, you can't handle Chael P. I'd have gone right with it. I'd have gone, man, I've seen guys pull out of a lot of fights for a lot of excuses, but I got to tell you, this one really takes a show. I would cast a shadow if it was even real, just to be a scumbag. What a terrible thing to do, but you don't have a whole bunch of options. Like that guy that I'm doing it to, if he thinks, wow, what a jerk. I mean, how could he be so callous in my time of need? It's well, you could look at that way, or you could understand that I'm your partner. And I'm trying to keep business alive. And the idea of you having to be wheeled out there or getting in front of the headlines that are going to say only within the Texas Commission, we could just skip around all of that, and there is a different approach. And where it lies right now is that everybody's trying to lay out. Just lay out and move on. And they will get away with that unless the media asks some questions. You're right, unless the media stays on this, to all three of them. Hey, Mike, what happened? Why can you be in the ring, but you couldn't stand up and walk off the airplane? Hey, Jake, how do you feel about taking on a guy that hasn't done this in X amount of time and hearing that he's got this public ailment, right? Of which there's answers to, by the way. I mean, don't make believe that Jake Paul is feeling great. Like, I always hear fighters talk about that, right? One guy comes out, I got the hurt elbow, I got the hurt hand. It's like, I don't disbelieve you, but for sure your opponent does too. There is no scenario where you go through a training camp where every day, whether you're putting on pads or not, you're punching and kicking and being punched and kicked at. Like, there's not a scenario where you feel great. So, I mean, I just share with you, like, there is an approach by Jake, but I don't know that he'll take it. And I just want to see how that whole thing comes out. Eddie Hearn asks one question. He says, look, that was an ailing Mike Tyson back then. What do you think he's improved? It's a reasonable question if you want to dampen it, but I will concede, like, if you want to harm that event, that was powerful. But if you're ready for it and you have an answer, there's ways to deal with it. And step one, don't apologize. Yes, he's ailing. It's why I took the fight. To get myself credit, while you know, Eddie, that he's ailing, the rest of the world doesn't. They think he's scary because he got a tattoo on his face. I wasn't scared of him in 2003, and I'm going to whip his ass in 2024. Like, there's ways that you can deal with it. But you only get one crack. And if the media was to stay on it, and between asking Tyson's side, between asking Paul's side, and then you ask the commission's side, who isn't going to be prepped with PR, it's a potentially disastrous spot. And no one's going to do anything. And I do mean nobody, and I do mean anything. No one is going to flinch or do anything unless they're pressured by the media, unless they're pressured by appearance. Make no mistake. They will not err on the side of fighter safety or anything else that they hang their hat on to take 6%. Not at all. They will do nothing at all, or they will make a big change. It all depends on pressure, and I don't know which way that's going to go. But I do know that I'm not the only one that's recognized this. I do know Paul himself, who's been very good at this, has recognized this, and he has a backup. I personally am very curious who that is.